Welcome back to Cleared For Takeoff, the private pilot journey. I'm your host, Dylan. I'm here again with my co-pilot, Matt, and today we're diving in what it really means to be a good aviation student. Matt, welcome back. It's good to have you on.
Hey Dylan, that's excellent to be back on.
We've talked about choosing your training path and what it's like to start flying, but today's episode is about something that affects every pilot, your mindset as a student. Because being a good aviation student isn't just about memorizing checklists or passing tests. It's about how you study, how you fly, and how you handle the challenges along the way. So let's jump right into it. Let's start with something simple. In your opinion, what makes a good aviation student?
A good aviation student would be someone who is always laser focused and ready to jump into something new.
Would you say somebody who has strong character and is able to pursue goals headstrong in a way that makes them good at learning?
I think that would make them an excellent pilot. You have to be able to jump right into things.
I agree. When you first started training, how did you approach studying and preparing for lessons? Was there anything that helped you stay organized early on?
Stay organized early on. I just kept running through checklists, make sure I knew everything, and flying consistently. It really helped me to stay on top of aviation.
I think with stage one primarily, back to, I don't know if you recall, learning the flows and having your flow card checklist. I felt like, and it was always recommended to us to chair fly and use the flows like you'd actually use them in the plane. I think that's where I learned them best, and not just memorizing them step by step, but just going through the motions, I think, is very critical to learning to that, if you understand what I mean.
I do. I mean, going back to the great chief of Tim Townsend, he drilled it into us from the day one of Bridgewater Aviation's summer start. He said, look to your left, look to your right. Those people that you're sitting with, you're not going to be around them when you graduate.
Absolutely. I do recall him saying that. And, everybody learns differently. Did you find yourself more of a hands-on learner in the airplane? Or did you like to have everything studied and ready to go before every flight?
I found myself kind of more of a hands-on learner in the airplane. You can only look at stuff so much in the textbooks and by watching YouTube videos and trying to learn what you're doing in the airplane online. It's better to actually be gripping the controls and doing the actions to become a better pilot.
I agree wholeheartedly, especially when they recommend you to chair fly and chair fly when you can't get in the air. But when you build that preparation and that muscle memory of simulating being in the aircraft, I found being prepared for the lesson is the most important way of success, if you get it. So let's talk about attitude for a second, a perfect segue, because mindset plays such a huge role. How important do you think it is to stay humble and open-minded during training, especially when facing adversity, like maybe a bad lesson or something you're struggling to pick up with?
Dylan, mindset plays a humongous role in flight training, not only for private but for instrument and commercial. You kind of have to always have an open mind because you see things one way, whereas your instructor sees things a different way, and you have to stay open-minded to overcome new training difficulties that you may encounter.
Especially with new lessons, sometimes you don't always get it on that first try, and sometimes you get discouraged. But going into that with that positive mindset and being prepared to take criticism, I think is very important for the learning process. And you know what? For some people, feedback can be tough. How do you personally handle criticism or corrections for your instructor, especially after a rough flight?
I take that criticism as a learning step. It's a point to move forward rather than a step back. Obviously, as humans, we learn from our mistakes. Sometimes you have a tough flight where you're walking out of the debrief and you're thinking to yourself, hey, maybe I shouldn't have been a pilot. This is getting really tough. Maybe I wasn't built for this. But then you go to bed at night and you wake up the next day and you're like, oh, I would love to step back in the plane again. I can't get away from it.
I can say that I've definitely had those experiences. After a bad landing or two and your instructor's debriefing you and telling you, dude, what was that? What are you up to? You can really take that to the chest, and sometimes it's hard to take criticism like that. But you have to look at it as a learning environment. Nothing's personal. Everybody wants you to get better. So if you can learn from that mistake and push forward, it's better than tripping over those hurdles and really getting stuck on one bad thing, But for one of the biggest challenges for student pilots is consistency. What was your approach to staying current and sharp between lessons, especially when there's big breaks, sometimes a couple days or even a week between lessons?
Always, look over your notes, make sure you're kind of staying ahead of the game. And if at all possible, keep flying with your instructor, even if it isn't to keep pushing forward. Just do review flights to keep your currency and proficiency. Be it proficiency, overrides currency any day in the airplane. Because if you can fly that plane proficient, you don't always have to be current to do that.
Yeah, I agree, especially back to chair flying. If you can think of aviation as often as you can, that proficiency will come. Now, I think that's a big part of it, but I always tell people, even if you can't fly, stay connected to aviation somehow. Study your POH, chair fly, listen to YouTube videos, air traffic control videos. It's all in your head about living aviation. Now, back to talking about pilots, everyone has a frustrating flight. How do you handle those moments when things don't go your way in the plane and you have to take a second, step back, think about what you're doing? How do you handle those stressful moments?
Well, Dylan, you have to realize, if you're doing a approach to land and you mess up the approach on an instrument flight, you can always go around, you can always fly the missed approach, you can always stop. You don't always have to continue and disappoint yourself even more and more.
That go around is very important. I think students have to learn that going around is very acceptable and encouraged. It shows that you're a good pilot. If you get behind the aircraft during an approach and you feel uncomfortable, a lot of students will say, hey, I want to impress my instructor, or I want to show them that I can do this. But you can actually show your instructor you're capable of knowing when you're out of control and going around and staying ahead of the aircraft. You aviate, navigate, and it's important to stay with that aircraft. But post-flight, what's the debrief process like for you, or even when you're with an instructor? Do you take notes afterwards or talk things out with your instructor to figure out what to improve on next time?
Yeah, so I'm in my instrument training, and my instructor takes a lot of notes during our flight, and we go over them in the debrief, and he tells me what I have to improve on. Some days, there's good comments. Some days there's bad. Some days it's comments of like, Matt, what are you doing? You know how to do this. Some days you just make stupid mistakes, and you have to kind of live with those, but you can always take a step forward in flight training.
Yes, I feel that and understand. Is there anything else you'd like to touch on before we wrap this up? Anything that's helped you, when you first started flying during summer start or stage one or even private as a whole?
Something that always helped me was getting a good night's rest. Nutrition is a key to flying. You can't be thinking about your empty stomach while trying to fly a traffic pattern.
Yeah, I mean, I'm safe, PAVE, those are all not just acronyms, they're things to live by. They're ways that keep you safe, and everybody else around you safe. But I think let's rip up with this. If a new student walked up to you and said, "What's your best advice for me as I start my pilot journey?" what do you think you would tell them going through up until now? What have you learned?
I would tell a new student to always listen to your instructor during the debrief. The stuff that they say, even pre-flight and post-flight, is one of the most important things that they can say. What we're going to be doing this flight, and how did it go in the end, and what can we improve on, what can we not improve on. But it's always important to know to keep taking steps forward, even if they are the tiniest of steps.
That's great advice, and I couldn't agree more. I think at the end of the day, it's all about staying patient, putting in the work, and remembering why you started. Well, that's going to wrap up today's episode for Cleared for Takeoff, the private pilot journey. Matt, thanks again for joining me and sharing your perspective. I think that's the advice every student pilot could benefit from. If you're out there training, remember, nobody gets everything right the first time. Progress comes from patience, consistency, and keeping that passion alive. Thanks for listening out there, and always keep your wings level and your attitude positive.